Creating quilted masterpieces is easier than you might think. Hey everybody, it's me, Angela Walters from quiltingismytherapy.com, and in this video, we're gonna turn this quilted fabric into some amazing quilted projects. I'm gonna show you how to create a quilted tote bag, as well as how to turn your quilting into some framed art. Welcome to the second video in the Hello Spring video series, where we are quilting together and creating some fun quilted projects. In the previous video, I showed you how to quilt this larger Hello Spring panel. We saw how to create some spring-inspired quilting designs, as well as how to add a little bit of detail with your quilting. And in this video, we're gonna cut up that panel and create our projects. And even though this is the second video in this 4-part series, it's not too late to quilt along with me on the custom panel I designed for the series. To learn more about the products and the videos in the series, all you have to do is click the link in the description box below, or visit quiltingismytherapy.com. So let's get to it. After we've quilted our panel, you could of course bind it and use it as a beautiful wall hanging. But like I said, you can also cut up the panel and create our projects. So let's get started with the first one, the tote bag. Tote bags are the fun fashion accessory that's perfect for carrying all your goodies while showing off your amazing quilting. And if you've never made a tote bag before, we're gonna have a blast. Because once you learn the basics of how it goes together, it's super easy to make tote bags of all shapes and sizes. For our tote bag, we're gonna start by trimming our panel right down the center. For my bag, I just need one large strip for the outside of it. And so that I can get the most out of this beautiful pattern, I'm gonna cut it right out of the center. It's gonna give me kind of a fun, abstract looking layout. Now the size you cut your strip just determines the size of your bag, but for ours, I'm gonna cut it out at about 18 by 40 inches. If you want a wider, larger bag, just cut your strip a little bit wider. And there I have the outside of my tote bag cut and ready to go. Now, in addition to the outside, I'm also gonna need a piece of lining fabric the same size and some strips for the straps of the bag. You can make these strips as long and as wide as you'd prefer. For these strips, I've cut them out at about 4.5 by 34 inches. That's just because I like a little bit of a shorter strap. And then if you want a little bit more sturdiness to your straps, you can also add in a few strips of batting. This will not only help give it some more stability, it's gonna make it a little bit more comfortable to tote around. These are about 1 3/4 inches wide. Well, now that I have all the pieces to make my tote bag, it's time to start assembling. For my tote bag, I'm gonna take it and fold it in half right sides together. This is gonna give me a nice folded edge as well as 3 open edges. What I'm gonna do is stitch the sides down right here. I'm gonna be sure to leave the top open because obviously we want a tote bag to carry stuff. Now to keep it in place, I'm gonna use some clips and I'm gonna give a quick seam on both sides. Once that's done, I have my 2 closed edges, my folded edge, and of course that top nice and open for my tote bag. Now I'm gonna set this aside for a moment and do the same thing with the lining fabric. Now before I fold this together, I'm gonna take a second and cut a little slit right down that center part. Leaving that part open is gonna give me a place to turn my tote bag right side out when I'm all finished. So don't forget this part because it's kind of important. And I just cut it about 3 or 4 inches or so. Then I'm gonna fold it right sides together and do the same thing, sewing on the sides, leaving the top and the folded edge alone. I used to leave my tote bags unlined just because I thought it was a little bit quicker. But actually taking the time to make the lining means I don't have to finish the top edges. This is actually gonna save us a little time and give our bag a little bit more of a polished look. Once those 2 parts are done, it's time to box the corners. And I'm not talking about boxing, I'm talking about taking a little pleat in those corners to give this bag a little bit more depth. This step is totally optional. If you wanted to, you could leave this step out and have a flatter tote bag, but I like to carry a lot of junk, so I'm gonna add those box corners. I'm gonna stick my hand in my tote bag and work my way to one of those corners. I'm gonna take a second and flatten it out like this. Then measuring from the top, I'm gonna draw a line across a quilted bag like this. Then I'm gonna sew on that line and then trim a 1/2 inch or so away from the seam. The distance that you measure from the point to here is gonna determine how deep your bag is. So you can play with this measurement, just make sure you do the same on all the corners. For our bag, I'm gonna measure it out about 1.5 inches. Then once I have that stitched down, I can trim about a 1/2 inch away from that seam and do the same on the remaining corners. Sticking my hand in there like a little puppet, folding it back on itself so it makes that nice little point. Make sure this marked line is going straight across that area. I don't really want it angled one way or the other. And then stitch it down through all those layers. Sometimes it helps to take that seam and kind of flatten it out just a bit. And we're quilting through a lot of layers of quilted fabric, so just take your time as you're sewing through that bulk. Once that's done, I'm gonna set it aside and do the same with a lining piece. And as you're arranging that fabric and kind of positioning that corner, make sure that that seam is centered on that little triangle. It's kind of funny. I feel like when you're quilting, you don't want any tucks, you don't want any pleats, you want that quilt nice and flat. Then we start making bags and we start making them all 3-dimensional and stuff. I mean, I wish I was a better bag maker because the bags that I see out there are so cool with pockets and zippers and all sorts of stuff. I'm just not quite there yet. Now that we have our 2 pieces boxed and ready to go, there's one last thing I need to do before I can start assembling, and that's making the straps. There are a lot of different ways that you can make the straps for your bag. You could buy webbing, a woven kind of fabric that's perfect for straps. You can do the tube method where you sew one side and turn it inside out, but I'm going to do a different method where you iron the pieces together and then sew it. I'm going to start by grabbing my strip and ironing them wrong sides together like this. Then I'm going to grab my strip, I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to iron the long edges right here over about 1/4 inch or so. That's going to give it its finished look without having to turn it inside out. And then do the same on the other side. I'm just kind of eyeballing that 1/4 inch, just getting it kind of close. But if you wanted to be a perfectionist about it, you could definitely measure that out. I think of making straps as kind of like binding a quilt. It's not the most glamorous part, but it is a necessity so that it can serve its function. Then before I fold this together, I'm going to take my batting strip and stick it in one side, kind of tuck it under that fold. Then I'm going to take this side, fold it over, line up those folded edges. And before I go to sew, I'm just going to take the iron and do one last quick pass over it just to kind of hold it down in place. Once that's done, I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and sew a seam right along the edge here and right along this edge as well. And then to give it even more stability, I'm going to add a couple more seams right down the middle. And here's what they look like right here. As you can see, I just did a couple straight stitches, but if your sewing machine had decorative stitches, you could do that. Or heck, you can even put on your free motion foot and do some quilting designs in there. I mean, why not? But now that these are finished, I'm going to start assembling my bag. I'm going to start by grabbing the outer part of my bag and turning it right side out and pushing out those corners. Look how cute that's looking. This is like the first glimpse we get to see of the bag. Then it's time to place my straps on the bag like so. Kind of lining them up where I want them to go, matching up those raw edges, and making sure that it's not twisted. To make sure that they're even, you could measure in from both sides and then place them just so. And then we're going to clip them in place. Of course, you could use pins, but one of my favorite things to use for bags like this are the Wonder Clips. These things are awesome because they hold a bunch of fabric together, it doesn't distort them, and you don't have to worry about poking your finger. And these aren't just for making bags, they're perfect for binding or holding together large strips, basically anything that you would use pins for. Then I'm going to do the same on the other side, turning it over carefully so I don't disturb the strap, grabbing my other one, and doing the same. Now that I have those in place, I'm going to grab my lining piece and stick this whole thing inside that lining. Now I want to keep my lining so that it's wrong side out. I want to see these seams when I put them together. That's going to mean these pieces will be right sides together when I sew them. So grabbing that bottom piece, I'm just going to kind of work my bag into it, making sure those straps are tucked in as well. Then I should have something like this. My lining is on the outside, the raw edges are out here, my front of my bag is on the inside with the right sides facing the inside of this. Then I'm going to grab those clips, I'm going to line up these edges and clip it all the way around. There's a lot of layers here, so clipping them in place is going to ensure that they don't start slipping around. And once I get to where the strap is clipped in place, I'm just going to kind of pull it up even, hold it together, grab that clip and clip through all the layers. And I might just add an extra one just to keep it in place. All right, I might be going just a little bit overkill by the number of clips I'm putting here, but I really don't want them sliding around. Better safe than sorry, I suppose. Do the same on the other side. Once I have it all clipped, it's ready to go. I'm going to take it to my sewing machine and just sew a seam all the way around it. I'm going to sew it with about a 1/4 inch seam right along that long edge, unclipping as I go and being sure to take my time because I'm sewing through a lot of bulk here. And I know it's kind of hard to see, but once I get to an area where there's a strap, I'm going to actually back stitch over it a couple of times just to help give it even more security. And since we're basically sewing one big tube, I'm going to have to reposition it often as I'm working my way around. Check that out, our bag is almost finished. It doesn't look like much right now, but it will once I turn it right side out. So going to that little slit that I left in the bottom of the lining, I'm going to pull the whole bag out through it. There's so many jokes I could make about turning this bag inside out, but I'm not going to. Just keep pulling, keep pushing. It's not glamorous, but it gets the job done until I have the whole bag out. Then I'm going to grab that lining and I'm going to close up this little gap right here because I don't want to lose any of my goodies through that hole. So I'm going to grab it, kind of fold those edges in, line them up and sew it together. You could do this by hand if you didn't want the seam to be seen, but since it's going to be on the inside of the bag, I'm not too worried about it. Then once that hole's closed up, I'm going to tuck the lining into the bag, kind of squish it all the way into those corners, and then just take a second to kind of position this top edge. Once I have that in place, I'm going to take it to the machine and sew one last line around the bag. Not only does the seam give it that kind of professional finished look, it helps hold those straps in place so they stay kind of pointing up. And after I'm done, I have my gorgeous finished quilted bag. Isn't that adorable? And like I said, it's really easy to change up the size of these bags. All you need to do is cut your first piece and your lining piece the same size, box the corners exactly the same, and you'll have a gorgeous bag in a lot of different sizes. Well, now that we've done that tote bag, let's see how we can cut up the panel and create some framed wall art. Turning your quilted panel into framed wall art is so easy to do that I almost didn't include it in the video, but it's a perfect way to display part of your quilted masterpiece in fun and funky ways. Plus, it allows me to skip the binding part of the quilt, which I don't love to do, and lets me get right to the wall decor. Doing it is as easy as you might think. I'm simply cutting up my panel into the pieces and framing them. The first step is to gather your frames. Since I'm cutting the panel into the pieces for my frames, I can use any size I want. You can buy brand new frames if you want a particular size, or you can go around your house and find those old frames that maybe you're not using anymore. Once I have them brought together, I'm going to take a second and write down the measurements I need for my frames. If the frame doesn't have a mat like this, I'm going to cut out the piece the exact size of the frame. But for frames that do have mats, I'm going to cut it out just a little bit bigger than the cutout. Once I have those measurements written down, it's time to start cutting my panel into those pieces. And when it comes to cutting your panels into those pieces, you can make it as particular as you'd like. I kind of like the more abstract look, so I'm just gonna start cutting these into the sections I need. But you can do a little bit of fussy cutting if you wanna highlight a certain part of your panel. And since I'm using frames of different sizes, I'm gonna start by cutting out the bigger ones first, and then cut out the smaller ones. This is always the scariest part, cutting into the actual panel. It's always like, oh, I spent so long quilting it, and now I'm gonna cut it up. But I know that the result's gonna be worth it, so it's fine. And since we're just putting them in a frame, it doesn't have to be exactly precise. So I'm getting it as close as I can, knowing that even if it's not perfectly square, it's gonna look great. I'm loving this center part right here, so I'm gonna actually cut it in half and then cut my pieces off of it. This is where that fussy cutting can definitely come into play. Now, I'm just cutting it up as I go, but like I said, if you want to be more particular about your fabric placement, you could take a pen and actually mark out all the pieces that you want to cut out so you can make sure you're happy with how they look. And that's going to be one of my beautiful framed pieces. And as I'm cutting, I'm using these reference lines on the ruler to make sure that it's kind of square on the corners. Again, like I said, it's going to be totally fine if it's not. I'm just kind of getting it as close as I can. And there's my second piece. Then once I have my bigger pieces cut, I can start cutting out my smaller pieces from the leftovers. Not only could you fussy cut out parts of the panel that you want to use in your framed art, you can also fussy cut out some of your favorite quilting designs. Let's say you quilted swirls over the whole thing, but you really love the swirls in this one part. Well, that's definitely the part that you want to show off. For instance, I love this little feather I did right here, so I'm going to fussy cut that out. And this one's going in a smaller frame. Then once I have all my pieces cut, it's time to start assembling them in the frames. So I'm gonna grab my frame and take it apart, nice and easy. Then I'm gonna grab my mat and attach my quilting to it. Now this is totally up to you. Your quilting could go behind the mat if you'd like, or it could go on top of it. And I kind of like the look of the quilting on top of the mat. Of course, this is just a personal preference. You can do whatever you'd like. So I'm gonna take my quilted piece, and I'm gonna place my quilted piece right on top of it, trying to keep it as centered as possible. Then to make sure it stays in place, I'm gonna flip it over and tape it on the back. We really just need this tape to kind of hold it in place as we get it framed. And if you're feeling a little bit extra, you can even sign your little mat right here as the artist of the piece. And check it out, super easy, super quick, and super adorable. So I'm gonna do the same thing with the rest of my frames. And then like I said, for the frames that don't have a mat, I just cut out the piece the exact size that I need it to be. Place it in there and then put the backing right on top of it. Like I'm telling you, so fast, so easy, and so adorable. Think about how great these would be as gifts, as a housewarming present, as a room decor. There's just so much you can do with them. If you don't have any frames laying around or you don't like a framed option, you can look into these. These are cool picture hangers that are magnetic. You simply pull it apart, put the quilted piece in there, and hang it just like art. And the good thing about these is your piece can be as long as you need it to be. So if you have a weird kind of shaped area in your house, you can definitely use these. Just put one part underneath the quilt, put the other part on top, and it magnets right in place. So quick and easy, and you don't even have to frame it. But once you have all your pieces prepared, it's time to hang them up and enjoy your beautiful artwork. This is fast and fun and super easy, and a great way to add a quilted look to your decor. So what do you think? Which project would you like to use your quilted panel for? I can't wait to see what you end up doing with your panel, so I hope you'll post pictures on social media and tag me in them. And even though we're halfway through this video series, it's not too late to join me. To learn more about the videos or to get the products that you've seen featured in the series, just click the link in the description box below or visit quiltingismytherapy.com. In the next video, we're going to quilt the smaller Hello Spring mini panel. I'm going to show you how to quilt the flower meander, show you how to change it up, as well as how to create your own designs. I cannot wait. Until then, everybody, happy quilting.